Hello, welcome to my session. I believe I'm now live. Yes. Hello. I'm going to talk around why you need to know the business to implement your data science project. This talk could be flipped on the other side to why you need to understand technology if you're in the business to implement a data science project. There's a chat section on the side. Feel free to put in questions. I'll stop as I go and answer them as necessary, or we can have some conversations after the fact. My name is Nechama Katan. I'm a director of data science at Pfizer. 1 second. My slides to screen for it there. So views expressed, standard disclaimer, views expressed here are mine and not Pfizer's. So the agenda today is wicked problems, different frames. Why does the business know? Why doesn't the business know what they want, and why can't the technical people speak English? The data science workflow and what you can do. I can hear a second conference in my background noise. I don't know if there's a way to mute that. Wicked problems. There's a wicked problem paper called this link up here, and when they talk about wicked problems and social complexity, we're talking around problems where you don't really understand the problem until you've defined the solution.
Is it coming from a model that really
I'm just going to give it the background noise.
Or is this talent from
because I can hear the second speaker. It's a little distracting.
Again, neither is different. It's just ensuring that you have the right
for the conference person who's on here, is there any way you can mute the other person? Because we can hear both speech talks, and it's rather distracting.
Universities do kind of two things, right? I mean, for all the things we like to beat our chest about,
one moment, let me just see if I can fix this.
And we develop knowledge. That's what universities
okay.
do. And so, in terms of
let me just see if I can fix the second audio in a minute. Maybe I can't. All right, I'm just going to keep going. So inside we have wicked problems. So the social complexity, where you have different frames of views of the same problem, and then wickedness, which are unknown problems that need to be iterated. Classical business intelligence is typically not wicked. A business wants a particular dashboard, or even simpler, a particular view of the data. That won't be muted. I think we need to contact to mute the other phone. I think we need to contact this line. Let me see if I can contact.
The second point there is collaborative research and innovation.
That's not working.
PhD programs.
Yeah, I know you can't hear me. I can't hear myself clearly either. Session support.
In data science. And when we launched that program,
please mute the other session. I'm just trying to put some notes, and I don't know how to contact the other person on my call. And it doesn't look like he's reading the chat.
And so we want to ensure that they can engage
1 second. To appear on screen, Data Science Connect. It's not working.
Part of their doctoral level training now. Historically, that was the case. But certainly, if you look at today,
I'm sorry, you guys. I'm not really sure how to reach the Data Science Connect people to get them to stop listening, because they're listening to the other talk, which is what we're able to hear. And I can't mute anyone.
Taking courses online, you're probably not up to speed on all
okay,
the one
moment. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, and for people who actually are very interested, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. So I can't actually talk over this. I'm sorry.
The problems that you're facing. And that then is carried into that fourth point about upskilling resources.
So conference,
data science
can I, whoever's, can I close out of that window? Out of which window, Data Science Connect?
Data science wasn't even offered.
Okay, I'll close. If I close out of this, I'm going to leave the conference.
And so universities are a great place.
I'm not listening to another talk. I have closed all my other windows. And absolutely nothing else open. So the Data Science Connect person, can you please look? Okay, I still hear the other session, and I think I'm hearing it from your phone. Can you please mute your line? Much better. Okay, we'll get through this. So, wicked problems. There's social complexity, which is different frames of view of the same problem. The person who explained this to me, yeah, we've got session 31 gone. Yes. Okay. The social complexities, the person who explained this model to me was an example of dredging the Columbia River. You had the Army Corps of Engineers that said we can do whatever we want. You have a bunch of environmentalists who sit over their dead bodies, right? Coming from the problem with completely different frames of mind. And then wickedness happens when the problems are really unknown. You don't know what the answer is until you see it. So if you've worked with business people, they'll be like, well, what do you want? You'll say, hey, what do you want? And they'll say, well, I'll know it when I see it. And that drives technical people insane. So in data science, your technical, the relationship to that is the newer technical solutions are built around really specialized complex tools, and the tech users are focused on the tech. So the tech users or the people like this on the call who come from the technology are like, I've got this great hammer, I'm looking for a nail, right? They've got a hammer, they've got a tool they can use, they want to apply AI. And the business, on the other hand, in some cases, some senior manager read a book, more likely nowadays watched a podcast about AI and came back to work and said, we need to do AI. No idea what AI is. And while there is an enormous amount of business sitting around the Fortune 500 companies, most of those businesses, unless they're technology native, have no idea which of their data is structured in ways that can be used for data science solutions, because that data was structured for other uses. So that's kind of those three different perspectives that you have in a data environment and these types of problems. So wait, my slides flew. So why doesn't the business know what they want? So the data sets are not as expected. Right? Your data sets were set up by the finance system to close your financial systems, or they were set up by sales and marketing to drive sales. In some cases, your data, if you work in a channel industry, your dollars aren't the same. If you get commission salespeople, they've got one set of dollars in their reports, and finance will have a different set of dollars, and operations will have a different set of dollars. Even the concept of a dollar changes. The analysis that the business is doing will leads to questions, which leads to more analysis. So there's a loop. It's an inherently looped process. In fact, it's probably one of these squiggly loops. I'm seeing you looking on my screen and drawing loops within loops and multiple loops, and the questions change over time because they're driven by business initiatives and business focus. And so if you have I'll take COVID as an example, if you have a retail business at the beginning of COVID, or any other business that engages directly with customers. At Pfizer, we had patients showing up to clinical trial sites. COVID hits, now those patients are no longer showing up to clinical trial sites, and you will have different questions. Those questions change over time, and you can have different questions being asked of the data in the same organization at the same time. And then, which gets to the point that the questions really depend on who is asking them. If a senior manager is asking, how are we doing as an overall high-level metric, versus somebody working mid-level management says, are we going to be on track to meet that high-level deliverable, versus somebody at the bottom of the food chain who is, or the bottom of the organizational chart, who's asking, what decisions do I need to make each day? So those questions are being asked differently depending on who's asking them. From the technical side point, why can't technical people speak English? They're going to say, well, the data was architected by a system to ask a certain types of questions. And if you ask them, or if you ask someone who owns a data system to answer a different question, often they'll say it can't be answered because the way the data was put into the tools, it is very hard to answer questions that data wasn't set up to answer. So, for example, if you have a tool that takes snapshots of data. So you've got, and there's a lot of this in pharma. You take a snapshot of data, 3 months later, you take another snapshot of data, another snapshot of data. Those snapshots are often treated completely independently by the tools, and they're cumulative. Now I want to know what changed from this snapshot to this snapshot. Well, a business person would say, well, just do something subtractive. A technical person would say, well, what about the data that happened earlier in that first snapshot that also appears here but got changed in the second snapshot? Do you want to include that? Do you not want to include that? So trying to explain changes over time in a discrete data model is very hard. The second problem that the technical people have is that it is so cool to be a techno-mage. I don't know if you're familiar with this phrase or not, but Babylon 5, everyone go watch it, has a concept of a techno-mage. Any sufficiently advanced technology appears to be magic to somebody else who doesn't understand that technology. And so you get to come into an organization and spin your data around and look super high-tech and science fiction-y, and that's really cool. And sometimes people are working on, people are caught up in that I am the coolest person in the room. The tools and the AI and machine learning tools, while they are going to no code and they are going to simpler models, still really require an expert user. You cannot take a random business user and spin them up to run an AI tool. Even business intelligence tools have gotten easy enough that if the environment is built, a business user can use them with an hour or two of training. The AI tools still, if a business user is going to use them, still require a week or 2 weeks of training, which means that your average business user isn't using that. It also means that your technical people who are trying to show that they're staying current with the latest tools are very, very tool focused, because if you're learning 2 or 3 or 4 new tools a year, which I think you are if you're an AI user, you're aware of 2 or 3 new tools a year and you're going deep in 1 or 2 of them, you won't have time to learn the business because you're too busy learning the tools. And then they're going to ask, why isn't the business happy with the questions that can be answered by the data? So I have had that over and over and over again, which is, hey, business users, here are the questions we can answer. Why aren't those the questions you want? We gave you 1,000 canned reports. That used to be what Salesforce would say. You have every possible way of cutting the data, and it turns out with 1,000 reports, you still don't have all the ways of cutting the data. So there's just a lack of understanding that really the business has a very specific question that they need to have answered, and that question isn't necessarily well defined because there's multiple loops, and that question has to be answered 95%, not 80%. Almost anyone can answer a question 80% correct. It really has to be answered completely correctly or pretty close to completely correctly. And if the data isn't structured to answer the new questions because you built the data for old models, it just simply won't. So what we have here are 2 different models. Actually, I would argue that these are the same models. This is your classic CRISP DM, data managed model, which is in all the textbooks for AI and machine learning. And what you'll see is that while there are, in theory, a couple straight lines here, bringing my mouse to work, these 2 straight lines and these 2 straight lines, they're really curves. You go from business understanding to understanding data, and you loop back and forth, right? That's your first little set of loops. You prepare the data. You loop as you model the data. You come down to evaluation, and then you loop back up to business understanding. Because as you evaluate the models, you find out that you're not close. I don't believe, and the textbooks would agree with me, as will probably most of you experience, that you can actually develop an AI solution without doing this bigger loop, coming down to evaluation and back, less than 4 or 5 times to make sure your model is actually exercised. If you think you can develop a model going through this circle once, you're probably not developing a model that's useful for the business. However, if I come and look over this, and this came out of that Wicked Problems paper that you can download, they talk about, SDLC, you gather data, you analyze the data, you formulate a solution, you implement the solution. Maybe there's some testing you put in place here, right? So that's that waterfall straight line, and neither of these 2 models actually work that way. In green, they were having they followed an engineer through a design path. And what they did was they started with the problem. The guy came up with a solution, right? Basically, they went from here to here. He evaluated it. That's down at the bottom. Oh, whoops. Nope, doesn't make any sense. Went back up to gather the business understanding, came down, right? So you can see here that this particular engineer did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 loops, almost back to business understanding, before he came up with an answer to the problem. And this is, I think, way more inherent for how people work, though many of our organizations are still focused on that agile, tell me what the requirements are. Until you can tell me what the requirements are, I can't give you anything. And what happens in that environment is the business gives up and says, just give me a table that I can dump into Excel. And the IT people are like, well, fine, we'll give you an expensive table that you can dump into Excel, and please don't ask for anything else, right? And that communication fails at that point. So what can you do? If you're in the business, recognize that data is only useful with a question, and try to understand what questions you're trying to answer or what types of questions you're going to try to answer. Ask lots and lots of questions if you're in the business, right? Don't just say, oh, someone's handed me this wonderful tool. They know what's going on. Know how to pair your questions to types of solutions, right? So certain types of questions work really well with RPA, robotic process automation. Some, let's say I've got a database and I want to see if someone has changed something in that database, write a SQL script with a diff. Some problems, a classification problem, for example, your classification problems work very well with AI. So as the business person, you don't need to know how to write all of those tools, but you do need to understand what are the individual types of questions and then keep learning. For the technical people, being a techno major is cool, but it's career limiting. You've got to be to where you can explain what you're doing to anybody. Understand the questions that the business wants to answer, ask questions, right? Really engage in that question asking process. Understand the processes that need to be iterated and communicate that to the business. This is not going to be a one and done, and then keep learning. So thank you. I think we're out of time. Feel free to reach out to me. And if there's a question or two, I might be able to answer one or two of them before we're out of time. If not, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I can answer the questions there. Any questions? I'm looking at the chat. I don't see anything else. Nope. All right. Well, thank you guys all for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. How do you deal with data privacy at Pfizer? Very carefully. You don't use data unless you know it's all been, our data is de-identified, and even then we can't use it unless we have specific informed consent for it. And that limits the kinds of projects we can do with clinical trial data. You're welcome, Ed. Any other quick questions while we still have a minute left? All right. Well, thank you. And as I said, I'm on a panel at the end of the day as well, and we will. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference, or the rest of the recordings if you're watching this in record mode.